DevilNeverCry.
What is up everyone, it is me DevilNeverCry, and as the title suggests, I got to get hands-on quite recently with Dragonball Sparking Zero. Special thanks to Bandai Namco for the invite out to the event. But in today's video, I want to give you my thoughts on the game, coming from somebody who grew up playing all of the Budokai and Budokai Tenkaichi games, but is somebody who has somewhat lapsed when it comes to playing more of the recent Dragon Ball titles. I still do have Budokai Tenkaichi 3 on my shelf, but it's been well over 15 years since I've played that game. But those of you who know these games like the back of your hand will likely feel somewhat at home with this title. Before even diving in and playing, the game had asked me whether or not I wanted the more standard, modernized controls, or whether or not I wanted to kick it old school and play with a classic control scheme that was somewhat similar to the older games. Even then though, the game does come with battle assist, which allows for things like follow-up attack assist, guard assist, combo assists, which ultimately streamlines the experience for those of you who want that level of help. During my play session with the game, I took the time to play through each of the individual stages, which should all seem rather familiar if you know Dragon Ball. And I thought it was a nice touch that you could pick the background music that played during your fights, but something that I found peculiar was the rule setting, which was team battle, which effectively meant that whenever you went to pick your character, you picked 2 additional characters, allowing you to switch between the 3 characters mid-fight. Being entirely honest, I ended up playing with a team of Saiyans throughout the entirety of my play session. I mean, who can resist? And Vegeta being the nemesis or enemy that you faced regardless of what team you had or what stage you're playing on, got an absolute smackdown, which is rather ironic of course considering he loved to mouth off every time a match started. But that does bring us immediately into the gameplay itself, and coming off of it, my impressions were that it was rather hectic for both good and bad. This game seems to have a substantial amount of mechanical depth to it, primarily because of the fact that I was doing or attempting to do so many things that I was often in the menus constantly trying to figure out or refresh myself on how to pull off specific attack strings, specific follow-ups, going through the game's different systems and how they worked, with movement, with attacks, with blocking, with all kinds of things. And so it can be quite overwhelming at first, particularly when you're in a nature like that where you have a limited amount of time with the game and you want to get the most out of it. But suffice it to say, there seems to be plenty for you to get stuck in here with. And that was definitely something that I appreciated. I know anime fighters tend to have some sort of a stigma, especially when it comes to arena fighters, which thankfully Dragon Ball has always managed to avoid, at least from my perspective. But going off of memory in the best possible way, it does feel like I was thrown back in time, almost like I was playing the PS2 titles. It definitely has a bit of a learning curve, and it took me some time to get reacquainted with what everything does, but when I did, I was having an absolute blast. Switching characters mid-fight seemed pretty cool, albeit I didn't use that feature all too much, but transforming, whether it was transforming into a Super Saiyan or transforming back into base form, definitely felt cool. I think it's one of those things that people always are concerned about when you have character slots that are taken up by a transformed character, but it was obviously nice to see that you could transform at will during gameplay. It was also great to see that they continued to diversify how the cast of characters felt, with the weight system for example, which is obviously a mainstay from the previous games in the series, but you have characters like Broly for example, who are big and heavy and fight just as you'd expect, rather slow compared to some of the more nimble characters of the cast. The CPU Vegeta that I was fighting didn't necessarily put up all too much of a challenge, but they did seem to give you a bit of a feel as to how the flow of the game was effectively going to play out. It seems like key management was definitely vital. I mean, you use ki for a lot of things, particularly for movement and for attacks, and so you kind of really had to balance things out and make sure that you weren't running out at vital moments, otherwise you'd find yourself, having to charge up or not being able to close the distance between your opponent, and so it felt like that was one of the large tasks you had, other than of course beating down your opponent into oblivion. On the whole, other aspect of hectic that I previously talked about is basically keeping up with the action. This game is gorgeous. I don't think anybody is going to deny that. It is a looker. It is fantastic to look at. It's brilliant to see things like the destructible environments. But at times when you're fighting in those destructible environments, for example, or you're fighting through the 3D environment, it can sometimes be really hard to see just what the fuck is going on. They've done their best to help the characters try and stand out from the environments, but when you've got all kinds of particle effects, dust clouds, again those environments, coupled with the fact that a lot of the time you're barely going to be fighting on the ground and most of the time you're going to be up in the air, it can be quite hard to follow what's going on. It is only a minor gripe, however, and the rest of the game's visual language and its design, from its animation to the characters to the environments, were absolutely stellar. The only other gripe that I potentially have with the game during my time with it, and it's not even a gripe at that considering it can kind of be avoided, is the enemy AI and particularly just how overpowered the sparking ultimate attacks felt. It literally felt like a win button. Vegeta had plenty of health left and I'd simply just charge up my ki and pull out the attack, and all of a sudden I'd have won and the demo would be over. Perhaps Bandai Namco has messed with some of the stats behind the scenes, whether it's putting the enemy health down, putting player attack damage up, so that people could have a smoother hands-on experience, I'm not quite sure. But it was disappointing to effectively have a win button that you could pull out at any time. I am going to go off of the assumption, however, that the AI difficulty we see here is not going to be what's in the final build of the game, or if it is, I'm almost certain there'll be an option to crank it right up. I distinctively remember having some downright atrocious and rage-inducing fights against the CPU on the previous PS2 titles, and I'm absolutely certain they plan to keep that legacy alive somewhat with this new title. So to sum up my hands-on time with Dragon Ball Sparking Zero, coming as an avid fan of Dragon Ball of course, gonna be entirely biased, but I really thoroughly enjoyed my time with the game, and I left wanting to play more. This game knows exactly what it is, fans know exactly what it is, and they know that it's geared towards people who are fans of the series, and I can imagine if you don't know what Dragon Ball is, or if this is your first exposure to it, you'll probably think, oh my god, this game looks absolutely gorgeous, but I have no idea what the hell is going on. Speaking to some of the other content creators who came to the event, all of them seemed largely positive on the game, albeit some of them also shared sentiments that initially the game seemed to be rather hectic or confusing, but that largely is of course because there is a learning curve to the game. My only other curiosity when it comes to the game is going to be the game's online PvP and just how that netcode is going to hold up, whether it's going to be serviceable and fun or whether it's going to be a laggy mess. There has been some gameplay I know online that we've seen before, though some have suggested that that's a LAN connection and not necessarily indicative of how it's going to be online, but I'll refrain from making judgments until I've had hands-on experience with that system myself. But with that, we do come to the end of my hands-on session, so thank you all for sticking around if you managed to make it to the end. Let me know down in the comments below which one of the Tenkaichi games is your favorite, and if you enjoyed this video, do be sure to leave a like and consider subscribing so that you don't miss out on any upcoming Dragon Ball Sparking Zero content. With all that said and done, it has been me, DevilNeverCry. I'd like to thank all of you for watching, and as always, I'll see you all next video.